excited to be with you to talk a bit about the work of the FINRA Foundation and FINRA, and importantly, to talk about, financial capability in the U.S. And, as, Dr. Jones shared, so understanding what is financial capability, how it has an impact on your life and on our lives overall, really kind of makes a difference. And so we want to make sure that at the end of today's conversation that we have left you with some actionable items related to the data and the research that we're going to share with you related to the financial capability, the 2021 financial capability study. And so importantly, we're going to talk about the National Financial Capability Study. We're going to share with you the national outlook, and we're going to do a little bit of a few deep dives in terms of what that specifically means for the African American community in comparison with other communities of color, and just so that you understand some of the trends that have happened over the course of the last several years. In addition, in doing that deep dive, we're actually going to do a little intersectionality cut, so that you are able to see when we start talking about the implications of financial capability, you also get a sense of where there are the differentiations between men and women in income and education as well. And then, of course, the educator in me always has to leave people with resources. And so opportunities for you to go online and use many of the resources that have been created by the FINRA Foundation and FINRA as the regulator. So Olivia, you can turn to the next slide. So one, I want to share a little bit about sort of who we are and what we do. So FINRA is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, and we are a self-regulatory organization that was created by Congress, in fact, to regulate the capital markets, specifically the broker-dealers all across the country that are buying and selling securities and engaging with investors. And our mission ensures that we are protecting investors and ensuring that there's market integrity. And in fact, the markets are working for all people. And inside of that mission, we make great educators in part because we are not trying to sell any information. We provide unbiased, facts-based information, because our commitment is ensuring that investors know how the market works, and that if there are any challenges or considerations, that they know that we are the organization that is designed by statute to ensure that their interests are protected. We, in fact, write rules for the capital markets. We enforce those rules in the capital markets. We are responsible for arbitration in the event that there are discrepancies between broker-dealers and investors. And then also we provide credentialing for professionals that work in the capital markets. And so many of you may have heard someone say that they have a Series 7, or they've taken the Securities Industry Essentials exam, or have one of the series exams. And we are the entity that provides that credentialing, as well as that continuing education requirements for market participants. Next slide. And inside of the work that FINRA does in its investor protection mission, there is the FINRA Investor Education Foundation, which Dr. Valdez and I both are members of, in also in our work in investor protection and the Office of Investor Protection for FINRA. And the FINRA Foundation, our main mission is to provide and ensure that there is financial capability information available for underserved communities. And we do that by our investor protection campaign, which focuses on fraud and scams that many investors will have to deal with. We also, which we're going to talk a lot in detail this evening, with regards to supporting research and research related to investors' behaviors, appetites, understanding overall what it means to be an investor in the U.S., and particularly focusing on areas now of where we look at the demographic differentiations in financial capability. And then finally, we also work in community, and that's providing financial education through our partnerships through scalable and demonstrated programs across the country, be that with the American Libraries Association, the Girl Scouts of the US, and then also supporting state level councils of economic education in the provision of the stock market game. And that's just a little bit of what the foundation does, but we would encourage you, of course, always to go to our website to learn more about the people we help, the knowledge that we have to share in our research, and then also the various networks that we strengthen all across the country to bring financial capability to all communities in the US that are part of our financial ecosystem. And so, having said that, I'm going to turn it over to Olivia to jump in and talk about this year's National Financial Capability Study and a little bit more.
So thanks, Rita, and thank you, everyone. I'm so excited that we get to be here and share this information. But basically, the information that we share, or most of the research that we share, is stemming from something called the National Financial Capability Study. So at the FINRA Foundation, this is a big research endeavor that we first took in 2009. And essentially at that point, there was no real large-scale study at the national level that looked at people's household finances. So what we did back then is we basically surveyed people across the 50 states and Washington, D.C., and asked them things about their financial capability. And so when we talk about financial capability, it's hard to really give a definition because there is really no one definition for financial capability. Different entities define it differently. And the way that we construct it is through these 4 pillars that you see below the screen. It's your ability to make ends meet. So can you manage finances month to month? Can you make, can you cost your expenses? Can you afford day-to-day living? So we ask some questions on that front. We ask questions regarding planning ahead. So are you thinking of your future, thinking about retirement? Do you have an emergency savings account? In terms of managing financial products. So, how do you engage with different financial services, financial products? So for instance, do you have student loans? Do you have a credit card? Do you have a mortgage? And not only do you have these products, but how do you use them? So if you have a mortgage, are you underwater? Do you owe more than that house is valued? Or if you have a credit card, are you able to pay that credit card in full month to month? Are you carrying balance over? So we really get into specifically not just what products people are using, but how are they using it? And then finally, we have this last pillar that we call financial knowledge. And so with financial knowledge, we both look at objective knowledge. So this is the only part of the study where we actually quiz people. So we ask people on, do you know, the difference between a stock and a bond, or do you know what interest is, or we have an inflation question. So there's some objective measures in there, but we also want to gauge how people feel. So do you feel like you have financial knowledge? Do you feel like you have self-efficacy? Are you able to, do you feel confident in your ability to manage your everyday financial life? So all of the questions that we have in the NFCS are basically funded on these 4 different pillars. So if we go back to the top here, we started this in 2009, and we've done it every 3 years after. So up to now, we have 5 waves of data. We did it back in 2009, again in 2012, 2015, 2018, and our most recent data collection was in 2021. And so one of the nice things about the NFCS is that it has a lot of respondents. So it's upwards of 25,000 people who participate in the survey. And we also collect a lot of demographic information. So beyond having this information about financial capability, we know individuals' state, their gender, their race and ethnicity, their income, educational level. We have a lot of different demographic variables that we can cross with these different financial behaviors and financial aspects. And then we can see how different communities are doing in terms of their financial capability. So that was a very long oversight, but this is basically where the data is coming from. So what do we see, right? In general, what we see from 2009 to 2021, so when we first started collecting the data to now, is that for many and in many measures, financial capability has increased. So we think, this is a pretty uplifting story. Things seem to be getting better. When we look at people's emergency savings, more and more people are saving more, or they're saying that they're saving more. They're having less difficulty covering expenses. And even in the way that they feel, when we compare 2009 to 2021, they are reporting that they're feeling better. So it's a pretty positive outlook when we aggregate all this data and we just look at the national level, how things have been, going. When we dig a little bit deeper and we specifically focus on Black adults in the United States, we still see these, this generally positive outlook. We see that more and more Black adults are saying that they do not have difficulty paying expenses. Financial satisfaction has seen an uptick since 2009. It's plateaued a little bit from 2015 to 2021, but we still see that things do seem to be getting better, not just objectively in these, measures like difficulty covering expenses, but also in the way that adults are feeling in terms of their financial satisfaction. So when we talk about financial satisfaction, we ask them like, how satisfied are you with your financial condition? And again, things seem to be getting better. And yeah, I'm gonna just turn it over to you, Rita. Go ahead.
Now, and so then when we jump into and then we take a sort of a deeper dive and do some comparative analysis in terms of looking at financial capability, and particularly looking at two measures of financial capability, financial fragility and having an emergency savings. And so financial fragility is actually defined as, can you handle a $2,000 shock in a particular month? So if something happens, God forbid, but if whatever happens, can you put your hands on $2,000 to be able to deal with that? And so when we look at, particularly in looking at sort of the African-American community in comparison to other communities, we see that 38% of African-Americans actually are not able to do that. And then we also look at, the ability to put their hands on emergency savings. We see that it's only 44% that actually have the ability to do that. And some would say, what's at the source of that? And so when we think about income, educational attainment, inheritance, decision-making competence, and also one's ability to take risk, that those are actually factors that are significantly influencing whether or not individuals actually have the ability to be able to handle that particular shock in a given month, or, are they financially fragile? And then when we take even a deeper dive and look at other factors such as experiencing a drop of income or having too much debt, we see that the trend continues, that when we look at particularly in communities of color, specifically African-American and Latino, that we see having experienced a drop in income has been, at 32%. Having too much debt or feeling that one has too much debt to be able to feel a level of personal satisfaction or financial security. And we see that out of the respondents in the survey, that only that 39% felt that they also had too much debt. And as Olivia had mentioned, that debt includes that student loan debt, mortgage debt, credit card debt, but that is actually significant because that leaves individuals feeling that they don't have necessarily the agency overall of their overall financial health. And then actually, when we take another slice of that and thinking about, what actually are some factors that support one having financial capability? And we've seen in the respondents of also looking at the recipients of inheritance. Specifically, there's a question that says, do you anticipate that you'll actually receive $10,000 in inheritance or higher in terms of an intergenerational wealth transfer? And also what we saw was that particularly when we look at, looking at the various demographics, that it is only, 18% of African American and Latinos that actually are anticipating that they're actually going to have that intergenerational wealth transfer. And we know that intergenerational wealth transfers, in addition to having taxable income or having investment accounts, in addition to other income, are significant in terms of one's overall financial capability and having the wherewithal to deal with the various storms financially that may appear in someone's lifetime. So then, Olivia, you want to talk about the gender, go through the gender gap piece?
Sure. So, we look at overall, things seem to be getting better. They seem to be getting better across the board, not only when we aggregate across races, but also within the Black community. But there's still these big gaps. There's gaps when we compare different race and ethnicities. We compare people of color, specifically Black and Hispanic adults, to, their white or Asian American counterparts. We also see gender gaps. So when we look at gender, and these are the same variables that Rita was talking about before, looking at financial fragility, having emergency savings, we see that women tend to have higher levels of financial fragility. 38%, nearly 4 in 10 can't afford a $2,000 shock. We're also seeing that they're much less likely to have emergency savings. So it's not just about race and ethnicity, it's also about gender. And that, when we look at the intersection of race, ethnicity, and gender, we see that there are big gaps. So specifically, when we look at Black women of color, Hispanic women, Black women, those are the groups that are specifically vulnerable in terms of financial fragility. You can see 41% of Black women report financial fragility, 40% essentially of Hispanic women. Few have emergency savings, 41%, 44%, in comparison to their male counterparts and to their counterparts in other race and ethnicities. So, having the ability to not just look at one thing, because these things don't happen in isolation, right? You're not just a person of color, you're also a woman of color, or there's all these other intersectionalities that really do make a difference in terms of financial vulnerability. Rita, do you want to do this?
Sure. So when we talk about sort of, looking at some of the trends of related to financial capability overall, one of the other areas that we look at in the National Financial Capability Study, and we do a deep dive in looking at investors specifically, and in taxable investors, and that meaning that individuals that have taxable investment accounts outside of their retirement account. So this is not your 401k, this isn't your 403b, or any other type of retirement account with an employer, but focusing on who are respondents that actually have investment accounts. And so what we actually have seen as part of the trend between 2012 and 2021, that in fact there has been an increase in excess of 25%, which is significant in terms of the number of African American and Latino individuals that have actually had those non-investment retirement accounts. And as I mentioned before, having a non-investment retirement account, in addition to intergenerational wealth transfers and income, actually makes a significant difference in terms of one's overall financial capability. But importantly, looking at where we see the trends and sort of these levels of increases, in fact, actually point to that there's still more that needs to be done. When we look at only, 29% in 2021 in terms of African Americans and 30% in terms of the Latino community, in comparison to other communities, still says that there is the need for us to continue to consider what's missing in terms of individuals being prepared for when they are no longer able to work, and what that actually translates into for long-term financial stability and financial capability.
And I'll add just a note here that when we talk about owning a non-retirement investment account, so these are taxable investment accounts, obviously outside of retirement. So this doesn't include things like cryptocurrency. It also doesn't include things like your 401k or an IRA. These are, in investing in stocks and mutual funds and bonds, but in things that are outside your retirement account. And Rita was mentioning, we have made really great strides. So in terms of market participation in African American and Hispanic adults, we do see a pretty impressive uptick, but not only is it not evenly spread across race and ethnicities, but also we see these intersections of gender and race. So those big strides that we see, it's mostly among Black men and Hispanic men. Women are still lagging behind in terms of taxable investments. So here, what this means is that from 2009 to 2021, what is the percent increase? So for instance, for Black men, their increase in owning taxable investments rose 37% from 2009 to 2021. For Black women, it was 17%. I mean, that's still a very impressive increase, but it's still clearly a disparity. Same with Hispanic women versus Hispanic men.
And so when we actually sort of dig a little bit deeper in talking about sort of what are some of the factors that influence whether or not individuals actually have investment accounts that are outside of their retirement accounts, and that is having these taxable accounts. One of the factors that we've been able to isolate is, in fact, do you have an emergency savings? I mean, individuals, looking at, and that's only 23%. But that is actually a significant factor that influences whether or not someone has an investment account, and outside a non-retirement investment account. Also, risk tolerance. Having income above $50,000, we've actually seen that that's another significant factor, as well as having financial knowledge. That those are factors that are generating whether or not individuals are actually being able to have investment accounts and really planning for their long-term financial futures. I also think it's important to point out that other factors, college and owning one's home. This is also sort of areas that, in terms of factors that are influencing and have an impact onto whether or not an individual has an investment account. And so as you think about personally your own financial capability, these are some factors to sort of keep in mind, be that from an income level, your financial knowledge, education level, and also home ownership, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in terms of some of the findings as well.
So one of the things that we think is so important is that different groups, different communities are non-homogeneous. There's a lot of variety in all of our communities. And so when we talk about a race and ethnicity as a monolith, we lose a lot of nuance, of course, right? So in our own data, when we look at income, we see that there's a lot of diversity within the Black community. There's, 41% are making between 15 and 50, but we see 24%, 50 to 100. There's a lot of variety in terms of income, a lot of variety in terms of education, age. In general, we're seeing that both Black and Hispanic communities tend to be younger. So here, 44% of Black adults in our data were 18 to 34. We see, obviously like pretty much equal distribution of gender, but in general, what we're trying to point out here is that the Black community is extremely heterogeneous. And so a lot of the patterns that we're seeing differ a lot by gender, by income, by education, by age. So one of the things that we did was we further looked at these different groups and how they differ. So by education, when we break out among Black adults, we're seeing that those with no bachelor's degree much more likely to be financially fragile. So we're seeing 41% of adults without a 4-year degree report that they're unable to handle a $2,000 shock versus 26% with a bachelor's degree. Similar findings with emergency savings. Those adults that don't have a college degree, much more vulnerable, much less likely to have this type of wealth accumulation. So similar to the findings that we're seeing for investment accounts, we see it for financial fragility, emergency savings. In terms of income, we see big disparities in income as well. Just having insurance, those with higher income, nearly all of them, nearly everyone that has over $100,000 or more in household income has health insurance. 82% of those making 100 grand or more, they have retirement accounts. So there's a lot of differences when we look by income levels. Same thing with age and gender. When we look at, this is like a mix of all of the different variables that we have in our data. So it's just a sneak peek, but we see similar patterns across the board. In terms of age, younger adults tend to be much more financially anxious. They tend to be less likely to own credit cards. So age is an important factor here too. Younger adults tend to do poorer. Gender, we're also seeing in a lot of cases that women tend to, feel less confident than men. They feel like they're less able to carry out their financial goals. So that's what we get to with financial self-efficacy. But, those findings are not true across the board. So one interesting finding is in terms of high cost borrowing. So when we talk about high cost borrowing, this is, like pawn shops, rent to own stores, payday loans, the usage of those high interest products. Whereas, in some of these other factors, we see that women tend to underperform in terms of in their comparisons to men. With high cost borrowing, it tends to be men that are using these high cost borrowing measures. So women are using a little bit less than do men. But in general, what we're trying to convey here is there's a lot of differences by age, by gender, by income in terms of financial capability.
And so one of the, final slides in sort of the cut was to also go into a deeper dive and talking about home ownership. As I had pointed out in a couple slides before, that home ownership being one of the variables that we found from respondents that sort of indicated one's overall financial capability and financial stability. But, again, when we do an analysis and looking at sort of in the younger cohort of 18 to 34, versus those that are over 35, we see, of course, those that are without college educations or college degrees, in fact, are 32% for men and 24% for women, less likely to own their own home. A college degree actually increases that substantially, but still, looking at for women, it's only 44% that are in this younger cohort versus 51%. When we then look at those that are over the age of 35, again, college degrees and college education indicate that, 67% of women own their own homes, and as opposed to 64% of men that own their own homes. The important piece of takeaway is that, having no college degree means that you are 3 times less likely to be able to own a home. And that actually, as we know, is been indicated as one of the factors for financial capability, but and specifically as it relates to being able to have, financial stability and to have overall net worth and wealth. Living the next slide. So, of course, we've actually, in the time that we've had this afternoon, this evening, have just given you just a couple data points about, the information and what's available in the National Financial Capability Study. On our website at finrafoundation.org, under the financial capability in the U.S., we have the full report and also lots of different ways that you can actually go in and look at the questions and take the actual survey itself to get an understanding of the questions that the respondents provided. Also, we have interactive data feeds that you can actually do a state-by-state analysis depending on where you are to look at some of the variables that we shared with you this evening. In addition, as Olivia mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, this is the 2021 was the 5th wave of the NFCS. And so you can actually go and look over time of the findings from the last 5 waves. So we would encourage you to go on to finra.org and take a look under NFCS as well.
And I'll add one little plug for a very recent data interactive webpage that we put out maybe 2 weeks ago. Now you can go in and you can look at, how you score in terms of your financial capability, your fragility, your, do you own a retirement account? And you can see how you compare with those, in your income, in your educational level. So you see not just your own findings, but how they compare with our data. So it's a cool little add-on that we just recently added.
Next slide. And so I'm going to quickly go through the next couple slides because I want to get to the final slide. Here, we actually at FINRA, as I mentioned early on, have an investor center. And in our finra.org and under investors, learn to invest, we have a wealth of information, both in terms of courses, spreadsheets, other documents that you can actually, take. There are snippet design courses for you to actually develop your own financial capability. And they're under our smart investing courses. But there's a wealth of information for any topic related to investing, into finance, into sort of, I would describe it, getting your financial house in order, that that the information that is there, it's factual based, it is unbiased. We don't have anything to sell. Our commitment is for you to understand how the markets work. And also, inside of that, you can go to the next slide, Olivia. If you actually on that, you can see that we have, if you are looking at for financial professional, we also have what's known as broker checks. So you can go in and check their credentials. We have fund analyzer, loan calculators, be that for your retirement accounts or for any other type of financial product where you may be taking out a loan. So you can get a sense of like what your payoff is going to be, how long it's going to take. There's also risk and scam meters. So, one of the things we do know that, there are bad actors in the marketplace, but we want people to be aware and to, understand when there may be some challenges or somebody is, running fraud or also understanding what your risk is to that fraud. So we have the fraud meter, the risk meter for you to take a look at. And so I would encourage you, and for those of you that are on screen now, there's a QR code if you want to just hop into that. So it's on your smartphone. You can flash on that QR code. It is active and you can use that. And we would encourage you to take a spin around finra.org under investors. And if there are young people in your life as well, we have courses that are designed for young people. And so that they can go on to, to really begin to get smart. And so the earlier you start, I always say the better off you will be long term. And one of the things I also like to share, and this is on the next slide, Olivia, is that I always say, here are the 10 things about really getting your own personal finance and your own financial capability in order. Oftentimes when we talk about sort of what does it mean, we do the research and we have the data about what's happening in communities all across the country and our population. But to really sort of bring that home, it becomes important for us to, take a look at our own stuff, take a look at our own lives. And I always just start with like, do you have a budget? And, people are like, yeah, I kind of have a budget. I know how much is coming in and going out. But I'm like, no, do you have it? Is it written down? And, oh, by the way, do you follow it? And I always encourage people, and I know we just got through tax season, that it is always important to do do your own personal financial capability checkup. I would hope people get their annual physical checkup for their health, but I also do your annual financial checkup to really take a look at, as an adult in the world, are you financially capable? Are you doing the things to ensure that you've got workability in your life? And can you actually deal with having a $2,000 financial emergency that will actually make a difference in terms of whether or not you're able to, fulfill your dreams and obligations in your life and with your family? And that leads to, do you have an emergency savings? And is that emergency savings funded? Some of the other work that the foundation has also done looks at that an individual that has $500 in, starting with $500 in savings, actually is able to withstand many of the financial hiccups that actually happen in terms of our lives, the surprises, the aha moments. But having $500 that you can put your hand on or have access to, essentially kind of can make the difference in terms of whether or not you are able to withstand whatever happens. That all being said, just like we set goals in our life about everything else, like, do you have a clear picture about who you owe? Do you have it written down someplace to know, if you, who do you owe? Being that can be credit cards, student loans, mortgage, whatever it is. It could even be if you borrowed $100 from your sister, your brother, your aunt, your cousin. Do you know where, do you have all your obligations written down in one place? Also, as part of your annual checkup, check your credit reports. You can get your credit reports annually from all the agencies for free. Know your credit report, check your credit. One of the things that we always, that has become, in the media and that's frequently talked about is that, people not understanding what their credit is and what are the different factors that are influencing their credit, but also in terms of some of the scams and frauds where people are making fraudulent charges and people not even knowing that that's even happening. So it's really important to also check your credit and to know what it is. And if you actually are, planning and to some point as part of your setting your own financial goals to be able to buy a house or to do investments, to actually kind of know where you stand and know where you actually want to go. Setting a goal for your credit score, I would always assert, is similar to like setting a goal of like what you want to weigh or not want to weigh for that matter, in terms of being in your overall health. Having aspirations for your income. What's your plan? What's your income strategy? Are you leveraging and monetizing your education and your skills and resources to continue to be able to have multiple sources of income to be able to support your life and your goals? As we always talk about, teamwork makes the dream come true. And that is also imperative as it relates to having your money team. When we talk about our financial lives, that also includes, having an accountant or being an accountant to be able to do your taxes. Do you have a financial planner talking to somebody that this is what they do all day long, 7 days a week, but they are focused and committed to creating financial plans and helping you fulfill your financial plan? Also, it's important to look at insurance, and that's actually sort of in the next box of understanding your insurance coverage. We all sort of live our lives, but it's also critical to make sure that we have adequate insurance such that, the unforeseen thing happens. Are we protected? So often that it is those, hiccups, or be that from, health, life, or otherwise, that actually can set individuals back financially and put people in financial precarious positions. And that also includes for estate planning, which I'll talk a little bit more about in terms of like having your paperwork in order. And having your paperwork in order includes, do you have, in fact, do you have a will? Do you have a trust in hand? If for God forbid something happened to you and you expire, what happens to your assets? And I know sometimes people will think that that's only for people with lots and lots of money, but I think the less money you have, the more important, as we found in the research, to be able to transfer in that wealth transfer, be that you have a home, be that it's whatever's in your checking or savings account or in your retirement funds, being able to transfer that to your beneficiaries and having them distinguish. And then, finally, I would also say about investing. You have taken care of all the things and sort of put your ducks in a row, but have you set investing goals? We know that part of how we build financial capability and also importantly, wealth and wealth transfer is not just by working every day in our income, but it's also in terms of investing in the capital markets. And so it's important and having money to retire and having that money sort of set aside to do that. So, I share all of these things with you for you to begin to think about, what do you want your net worth to be? And importantly, your net worth as it means for the next generation, or even as it relates to you being able to live the life that you want, and having the financial capability and the financial wherewithal to do that. And so with that, I'm going to stop talking, and we thank you for your time and your attention. And one last thing, let me not forget, let's do this. One of the things I am most proud and excited and delighted about that the FINRA Foundation has created is a dissertation completion fellowship. We will be taking applications beginning in October, but I'm starting as a precursor for this crowd so that if you know anybody who is ABD or who is, in that final year and they are trying to get across the finish line and need that commitment to be able to go away and write their dissertation and get it complete. We have the Dissertation Completion Fellowship for those that are in, and that's, looking at anything related to in research related to financial services, capital markets, systemic barriers related to financial inclusion and financial capability. We offer $40,000. We provide for 5 scholars, $40,000 each. And it's for a 1-year fellowship period, which will begin in June of next year. And we'll take people through the intended graduation of receiving their PhD. And so I would encourage you, if you know anybody, share this information. It's $40,000. We have a commitment to ensure that we are generating the next generation of premier scholars of color. One of the things is we know that there has been a dearth of PhDs in participating in financial services research, and we have a commitment to close that gap. And so I'm always excited and delighted to share that. We have graduated this year our first 2 fellows and have selected our second cohort of 5 individuals that will be beginning in June, not so far away. As our second cohort, and we are intending to continue to grow the pipeline of individuals that have completed their dissertations. I shared with Olivia this morning that, let's think about, looking at it generally, if we look at individuals over a 10-year period that have completed their dissertations, when we look at individuals of color, that number is less than 42%. And so it becomes really important for us as we are generating, and that what's the gap there? In many instances, it's the support and the finances to be able to do that. And so the FINRA Foundation and our Dissertation Completion Fellowship has a commitment to try to close that gap. And so with that, now I'm going to stop talking.
Oh my gosh, that was absolutely, I think I've gotten somewhat overwhelmed. I thoroughly enjoyed everything that you've shared, the statistics, just the display of the demographic information. I'm taking notes, I'm screen shooting, even though you said that you would make it available, there was just some things I had to touch on. I do want to start very quickly. We have a student, before I get to my questions, we have a student who said, that I'm about to graduate. And the question that Ms. Jameson posed is, how do I go about prioritizing my savings in the face of now dealing with student loans?
That is always sort of one of those wonderfully real questions. And I have to say, it is, it's a tightrope. And it is about making commitment and understanding that, one must have their education, but one actually in terms of when we think about sort of saving, look, it is day by day, month by month. It is that whole notion of putting some money away. And that is, of course, you have debt and obligations that one must pay first, but thinking about where you can and have any money to pay, to also pay yourself first in terms of that long-term savings, and is to do that. And that could be $50 a month, $25, whatever it is that allows you to be able to put some money away. Because look, over time, $25, over or $100 a month over 12 months, at the end of the year, what do you have? You got $1,200, and that's more than, and we know for statistically, the ability to be able to put your hand on $500 can make the difference. So, and it is, remembering from financial capability standpoint, it is the slow and steady that's actually winning the race. And I know that is counter to our culture, but that is actually one of the things that when we talk about building wealth and building our financial capability, slow and steady. And so, if it's $25, whatever you can put away and keep it away and don't touch it, but the magical compound interest also pays dividends every day of the week. So that is what I would just share with you, is my grandmother would say, do what you can.
Ms. Hudson, who's another student, you've inspired her, Ms. Hudson, enough. So the question is, I want to go into business for myself. And so now what advice do you have if I'm going into business for myself?
And going in, and that's it. I think what's wonderful about that is that, in fact, when we think about, who are the entrepreneurs in our community, they are women, and they are women of color, and African-American women, particularly over the last 5 years, have had the largest percentage of increase in terms of starting their own businesses and succeeding in starting their own businesses. And so again, I always say teamwork makes the dream come true. And so it's really putting your team together, putting your team in strategy, and really thinking about, what is your business, and doing that fundamental business analysis as an entrepreneur, and being real and having the team around you that actually is going to support you, one, in terms of your business development, in terms of funding it, but also in terms of being sure that you are in reality about what you're creating and how long it's going to take to create it. Also recognizing that there are an inordinate amount of resources available, both from, many institutions across, the state and federal government that are supporting young, new businesses and entrepreneurs in terms of growing and developing their businesses. So I would encourage you to, seek out those sources, be that from the Small Business Administration, at your state level, and many other nonprofits all across the country that are, committed to individuals building their own businesses.
My last question I'm going to have for you. So I fell in love with those 10 things. You could have just left that slide. You could have did the entire presentation on those 10 slides. But here's my question for the graduate students and those who will be walking across the stage. Let me ask you this. What are the top 3 things on this list before they go to sleep tonight you want them to do? And what on that list by the end of the week you want them to do among those top 10? All
right. Oh, so I love that question. I'm like, okay, so what do you need to do tonight?
Before you go to sleep.
Before you go to sleep, can you have a budget? So I'm going to answer that. I'm going to do a 1 and a 1A and a 1B. Know what your budget is. Like really, like no kidding. Have a budget. Write it down. If it's not in writing, it's a someday phenomenon. Write it down. And then importantly, also be clear what you owe. Like so many people are, chasing pink elephants and have no idea of how much they owe, what, and where, who, when, where, and what. Basic. Just if you have that much done tonight before you go to bed, or I'm going to give you until tomorrow at 6:57.
There we go.
Hours, 6:57, because it may take some time, because I know some people got to go look at their accounts, got to look at, they haven't been necessarily following along of what's going on in your PayPal account also counts, or your Cash App, to really kind of know where you're spending your money and doing what. But having an accounting of what you're bringing in, what's going out, and what needs to go out. And that's just one of those fundamental things. So I'm going to share that with you. Then the other thing I'm going to leave you with, when it comes down to you're about to walk across the stage, everybody's there. What's your aspiration? Where do you see yourself? What do you want to have 5 years from now? And begin to unfold that. Because if you don't know if you don't have a dream, a doll in a dream, then I would assert, what did you spend all this time for? And so thinking about, where you want to be 5 years from now, and even having a dollar amount in mind, you may actually exceed that. But having you can say 5 years from now, I want to have in some way, shape, or form $10,000 or $20,000 stuck someplace. It's possible, but if you don't create it and say it and put it out there, it's not going to happen.
I tell you, you have me just overwhelmed. It's so exciting. I want to turn, we have about 3 minutes left. And of course, I want to turn this over to our dean. I'm sure she has a few questions and a final recap. So Dean?
Thank you, Dr. White and Rita and Olivia. I just thank you so much for sharing such a fantastic presentation. As I was listening to you guys talk, I was thinking about myself 25 years ago. And I didn't have any of these things you're talking about. I had a job. I had a job, and probably if I had $500 in a savings, maybe I had 500 at some point in time. But as I listen to you talk about this, I'm sharing this because I want the students to understand that this doesn't happen overnight. I can remember several times in my early career life, how I spent more than I made. I was always trying to catch up. And just at some point, well, there was a situation that occurred when my mother visited me. And she and I often laugh about this now. My mother visited me, and I was planning all of these things that we were going to do. And so we were sitting at the table, and I said, okay, we're going to go here, and I said, wait just a minute. So I run and grab this stack of credit cards. And I say, this is how I said, she had said, do you have money to pay? I said, oh yeah, I got money. I had these credit cards. And she said, she looked at me and she said, Jenny, you don't need to use those credit cards. I have money, I'll pay. I was so deflated until after she left. I went to consumer credit counseling, and literally cried big old tears when they cut up all my credit cards. But I had to make a decision about whether I wanted to continue to live like this as I grow older, or do I want to get my financial situation in place? And that was a hard, very hard thing for me. But I got beyond that, and I made a difference. So these things that you're talking about can be done. They're about making some tough decisions about where you want to go, or whether you want to always live in this in-between space when something comes up, and not anything major, just day-to-day living happens and you're not able to take care of yourself. And I want to say to the students, I don't think in any way Rita or Olivia is saying that you got to have it all at the beginning. You're going to know it all at the beginning, and that's not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that you got to at least start somewhere. And so that's what I would say to you guys. And finally, Naya Parsons Hudson, one of our students who asked a question about her business, Naya came to us last year when we did a piece on financial literacy during Smart Money Week. And she attended the presentation, and she was so excited and gung-ho around what we were doing. And she wanted this to come to her colleague. She wanted us to do something so all of her colleagues could understand the importance of this. And so we had this glorious plan to do a lecture every Monday in this month. And of course, we couldn't make that a lecture on financial capability, and we couldn't make that happen. But I think having you guys, I'm clear in my head that having you all speak with the students tonight, speak with all of us tonight, has really covered that month's worth of information we were going to share. So I thank you so much. I am so appreciative of you all speaking with us, and we're going to post these PowerPoints up. I have the perfect student in my head already that I know I'm going to encourage to apply for that dissertation grant. And I just think that good things are going to happen for us. Thank you all again.
Thank you all for joining us on our final Monday night lecture series. To our guests, Rita and Olivia, thank you. What you have provided us have been absolutely invaluable. We tell everyone to stay tuned for the new year or a new series of lectures. So on behalf of myself, our dean, and our other lecture series member, Dr. Thomas, we thank you all for joining us on this Monday. Enjoy your spring. Enjoy your celebrations. Take care.
Thank you all again. Bye-bye. Rita, I will be in touch with you.
Excellent.
Okay, bye-bye.